All right, let's dive into one of America's most notorious unsolved mysteries, the Zodiac Killer. We're using the Wikipedia article as our main guide today, and believe me, this case is a real head-scratcher, even after all these
So what I
years.
find truly fascinating about the Zodiac case, it's that it continues to grip our collective imagination after all these decades. The unidentified killer, the cryptic messages, the ciphers, they all just add to this aura of mystery that keeps people hooked.
Yeah, it really is like stepping into a real-life thriller, except we're missing the final chapter. And we know that the Zodiac is officially linked to 5 murders in the San Francisco Bay Area between 1968 and 1969, but the killer claimed many more. And over the years, investigators have explored all sorts of possible connections. Where should we even begin with a case this complex?
Hmm. Well, a good starting point, I think, is always those confirmed cases. The first 2 victims were David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, just teenagers on a date. They were shot and killed on Lake Herman Road in December of '68. Then just a few months later, in July of '69, the Zodiac struck again, shooting Michael Mageau and Darlene Farron in a Vallejo parking lot. Darlene unfortunately didn't survive, but Michael did.
And that's what's so crucial about Michael's survival, right? His eyewitness account, along with the police sketch based on his description, they've become almost synonymous with the Zodiac's image.
Exactly. It's one of the few concrete pieces of the puzzle we have to work with.
Yeah. Then things took an even darker turn with the attack on Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa in September of '69.
That attack in particular, it's just chilling. The Zodiac was wearing a costume, an executioner's hood with those sunglasses clipped on, which instantly makes it more terrifying. And then there's the fact that he marked the victim's car door with that chilling scorecard. Vallejo 12-20-68, 7-4-69. So 27-69, 6.30 by knife. It's like he was keeping some sort of macabre record of his crimes.
It sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? And to make matters worse, the Zodiac called the Napa County Sheriff's Department himself, reporting the murders, and then just vanished.
You know, it speaks to a real desire for control, a need to manipulate not only the police, but also the public's perception of him. It's a theme that continues to surface throughout the Zodiac case. He craved notoriety and actively sought it out.
And he certainly got it.
Yep.
Just a month later, the Zodiac was in San Francisco, killing a cab driver named Paul Stein in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. What I find so intriguing about this case is that it breaks the pattern we'd seen up until this point. His previous victims had been couples, but now he targeted a single male victim. Why the change? Was he panicking, seizing an opportunity? Or was there a more sinister motive at play?
That is a question that continues to baffle investigators. Did this signal a shift in the Zodiac's modus operandi? Or was it simply a crime of opportunity? It's difficult to say for certain. What we do know is that the Zodiac wasted no time in making sure this murder was linked to him.
You're talking about the letter sent to the San Francisco Chronicle the next day, right? But this wasn't just any letter. Inside was
A piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, a truly gruesome proof of his crime. And it marked the beginning of a series of chilling letters and cards that the Zodiac would send to the press and authorities.
It really drives home the point that this wasn't just about the killings for the Zodiac. It was about the attention, the fear, the control he wielded over the narrative. And then there are the ciphers, those coded messages that became almost as infamous as the murders themselves.
Yeah, the ciphers added a whole new layer of intrigue to the case. The first one, known as the Z408, was actually cracked by a couple in Salinas, not professional code breakers. They used nothing more than logic and pattern recognition. It's a testament to the public's fascination with this case and the lengths to which people would go to try and understand the mind of the Zodiac.
That is amazing. What did that first cipher reveal? Did it finally unveil the killer's identity?
Unfortunately, no. The message was riddled with misspellings and ramblings. But it did offer a glimpse into the Zodiac's psyche, a disturbed and dangerous mind. He claimed to enjoy killing, comparing it to hunting, and even made disturbing references to collecting slaves for the afterlife.
That's a truly disturbing detail. What are we to make of that statement?
It's difficult to say with certainty. Was it a genuine belief? A bizarre attempt at humor? Or simply a way to further taunt and mislead investigators? This detail underscores just how complex and challenging it is to truly understand the Zodiac's motivations.
So while the Z408 was solved, the case was far from over. The Zodiac continued his correspondence, but as you mentioned earlier, his communication started to change.
Precisely. There's a noticeable shift, especially after the November 1969 letter, where he included a diagram of a bomb and claimed to have killed 7 people.
7. But we've only talked about 5 victims so far. Who are the other 2?
That, my friend, is another one of the many mysteries surrounding the Zodiac case. Officially, he's linked to those 5 murders. But there are numerous other cases that investigators have explored for possible connections, cases that fit his modus operandi and timeline. 2 that stand out, due to some chilling parallels, are the murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards in 1963, and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966.
1963. That's years before his first confirmed kill. Are you suggesting the Zodiac might have been active much earlier than we initially thought?
It's a chilling possibility that investigators have explored. Remember those details about the Domingos and Edwards murders I mentioned earlier? Young couple, attacked near water, use of pre-cut rope. It all bears a striking resemblance to the confirmed Zodiac attacks.
And what about Sherry Jo Bates? Why does her case raise red flags for investigators?
Oh, Sherry Jo was a college student who was brutally murdered in Riverside in 1966, months after her death. A handwritten poem titled "Sick of Living but Unwilling to Die" was found carved into a desk at our college library. The handwriting and style were eerily similar to the Zodiac's.
So we could be dealing with a killer whose reign of terror spanned nearly a decade. That's terrifying. But why would the Zodiac claim a higher body count if it wasn't true? Was he just trying to inflate his reputation? To make himself seem even more dangerous?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was he trying to inflate his reputation, playing mind games with investigators? Or did he truly believe these other victims were his doing? It's a puzzle within a puzzle, and it only adds to the complexity of the Zodiac case. And speaking of puzzles, you're right. There was another cipher, the one that remained unsolved for over 50 years.
Right. The Z340. Didn't a team of international codebreakers finally crack that one in 2020?
They did. And what's interesting is that while it didn't reveal his identity, it did confirm he wasn't the person who had called into a TV show claiming to be the Zodiac. This incident highlights the media frenzy surrounding the case, with many seeking notoriety or attempting to mislead the investigation.
So even with all the advancements in technology and decades of investigation, the Zodiac's true identity remains a mystery.
It does. But the case is far from closed. There are still active investigations, and dedicated researchers, both amateur and professional, continue to search for answers. The Zodiac Killer, more than many other killers, embodies the puzzle aspect of true crime, and that puzzle continues to fascinate and frustrate us to this day.
It's incredible how this case, even after all these years, still has the power to inspire such dedicated research and speculation. What is it about the Zodiac that keeps people so captivated?
I think it's that puzzle aspect we talked about earlier. He left behind ciphers, symbols, coded messages, almost like he wanted someone to figure him out. He saw himself as some kind of criminal mastermind, challenging anyone to unravel his twisted game.
But do you think that was really his goal, or was he simply trying to create chaos and fear without a specific endgame in mind? We can't forget that behind all the codes and speculation, there were real victims, real families who suffered because of this killer's actions.
You're absolutely right. While the puzzle of the Zodiac's identity is captivating, we should never lose sight of the human cost of his crimes. The families of the victims deserve answers. And that drive for justice is a major force behind the continued interest in this case.
Speaking of those victims, we've talked about those officially attributed to the Zodiac, the potential connections to the Domingos and Edwards murders and Sherry Jo Bates, but there are other cases that have been linked to him, some with even more chilling details. What are some of the most compelling examples?
Well, in 1967, there's the double murder of Enadine Molina and Fermin Rodriguez in Alameda County. They were parked on Vegasitos Road when a stranger approached and shot Rodriguez. Molina was then abducted and later killed near Sinal Regional Wilderness.
That's awful. What's the possible Zodiac connection in this case?
Well, the murders occurred near Pleasanton. And remember that one of the Zodiac's later letters, the one sent to the Los Angeles Times, had a Pleasanton postmark.
Could that really be a significant clue? It seems like a fairly common occurrence.
Yeah, you're right. It's not conclusive on its own. However, it's a detail that's caught the attention of investigators, especially since the murders of Molina and Rodriguez share some similarities with the Zodiac's confirmed crimes, namely the seemingly random targeting of a couple. It raises the question, was this a coincidence, or was the Zodiac expanding his hunting grounds?
It's certainly unsettling to think about. Are there any other cases that fit this potential geographic expansion?
There's the case of John Franklin Hood and Sandra Garcia, a young couple murdered in Santa Barbara in 1970.
Santa Barbara, that's a significant distance from the Bay Area. Why would investigators even consider a connection?
Well, remember, we're talking about potential links, not confirmed cases. The Santa Barbara murders, much like the Domingos and Edwards case, occurred near water, and the brutality of the attack, particularly the use of a knife, aligns with the Lake Berryessa attack.
So geographically and methodologically, there are some possible links. Makes you wonder if there's a connection we haven't uncovered yet, something that ties all these seemingly disparate cases together.
It's certainly a possibility. And then there's the case of Kathleen Johns and her infant daughter. In March of 1970, she was driving when a man claiming to be a concerned motorist stopped to help her with a loose wheel.
That sounds like it could have been a genuinely good Samaritan. What happened?
It turned out to be anything but. This supposed Good Samaritan drove past several gas stations, effectively holding Johns and her daughter captive for hours. He threatened to kill her repeatedly before she finally managed to escape.
That's terrifying. Was she ever able to identify the man who held her captive?
She was. Later, when shown a wanted poster for the Zodiac, she immediately recognized him as her captor, and as if to add insult to injury. A few months later, the Zodiac himself alluded to this kidnapping in one of his letters to the Chronicle.
It's like he wanted to make it clear that he could strike anywhere, anytime, and remain completely in control. But some believe he went even further and targeted law enforcement.
Right. In June of 1970, San Francisco police officer Sergeant Richard Raditich was shot and killed while writing a parking ticket. And if you recall, the Zodiac had threatened to target police officers before, hadn't he? After the bombing of a police station in Golden Gate Park, he wrote, "There's more glory to killing a cop than a Sid because a cop can shoot back."
Chilling thought. Do we have any reason to believe that Raditich's murder was actually connected to the Zodiac?
Officially, the SFPD denies that the Zodiac was involved. But they did reopen the investigation in 2004, so they clearly haven't ruled out the possibility of a connection. Which again just highlights how this case is full of twists and turns, potential connections, and lingering questions.
And perhaps the biggest question of all is how many? We've covered the 5 confirmed victims and several potential victors, but it seems like the true number remains shrouded in mystery.
Exactly. The Zodiac claimed a far higher body count in his letters, but proving those claims has been a challenge for investigators. One of the most puzzling cases potentially linked to the Zodiac is the disappearance of Donna Lass in 1970.
Can you tell us a bit about her case and why it's drawn so much attention from Zodiac researchers?
Well, Donna Lass was a nurse working at a casino in State Line, Nevada. She vanished one night, seemingly without a trace. Her car was found near her apartment, but there was no sign of a struggle or forced entry, months after her disappearance. The Chronicle received a postcard that many believe referenced Lass's disappearance. It included cryptic phrases like, "peek through the pines around in the snow," and mentioned "sought victim 12," along with the Zodiac's signature symbol.
So Donna Lass could have been the Zodiac's 12th victim. That's a chilling thought.
It is. And in 2023, a skull found near Emigrant Gap in the Sierra Nevada was identified through DNA as belonging to Donna Lass. That discovery added another layer of intrigue to this already complex case.
It's like with every potential breakthrough, the Zodiac case throws another curveball, deepening the mystery rather than solving it.
And that's what makes this case so enduring. The unsolved murders, the cryptic messages, the lingering questions, they all contribute to this ongoing fascination with the Zodiac Killer. It's not just about catching a killer, it's about solving a puzzle that has captivated the public's imagination for decades.
But it's not just the unsolved murders and cryptic messages that contribute to his notoriety, is it? The Zodiac case has had a huge impact on our culture.
Absolutely. The case has inspired countless books, documentaries, and even a major Hollywood film. It's sparked an entire subculture of zodiologists, amateur investigators dedicating countless hours to cracking the case.
It's amazing how this case, even after all these years, still has the power to inspire such dedicated research and speculation. What do you think it is about the Zodiac that continues to draw people in?
I think it's a combination of factors. There's the mystery, of course, the unsolved murders, the coded messages, the unknown identity. It's a puzzle that people are drawn to, a challenge to solve. But there's also the fear factor. The Zodiac was a real-life boogeyman who terrorized a community, and that fear continues to resonate even today. And let's not forget the media's role in all of this. The Zodiac was a master manipulator, using the media to amplify his message and spread fear.
Speaking of media, the Zodiac wasn't shy about seeking attention. He sent letters directly to newspapers and even threatened to bomb a school bus full of children if his demands for publicity weren't met. Do you think that need for attention is a key part of understanding his motives?
It's definitely a significant factor. The Zodiac craved notoriety. He wanted to be remembered, and he used terror as a means to achieve that goal. He wanted to control the narrative to keep people guessing, and in a way, he succeeded even after all these years. His story continues to be told, his name continues to be whispered, and the mystery of his identity continues to fascinate.
Yeah, it's a disturbing thought, but you're right. The Zodiac, despite remaining unidentified, has achieved a level of infamy that few other criminals have. But beyond the fear, the mystery, and the media frenzy, there's a very real human cost to this case.
You're right. We can't lose sight of the victims, their families, and the lasting trauma that the Zodiac's actions have caused. While we may never know for certain who he was or why he did what he did, we can honor the memory of his victims by seeking justice and continuing to search for answers.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The confirmed murders, the chilling parallels with potential victims, the ciphers, the letters, and the enduring mystery surrounding the Zodiac's identity. But there's one more piece of this puzzle that we need to discuss. The suspects.
Right. Over the years, there have been thousands of individuals investigated as potential Zodiacs.
Yeah.
San Francisco Police Department alone has looked into an estimated 2,500 suspects.
2,500, that's an incredible number. And out of all those suspects, were there any that stood out as particularly promising leads?
There were a few who, for a time, seemed to fit the profile. But the most well-known suspect, the only one ever officially named by authorities, was Arthur Lee Allen.
Arthur Lee Allen. Now, he was a school teacher, right?
He was, and a convicted sex offender. Allen had a number of things that made him a person of interest. He matched some witness descriptions, owned a watch similar to one found at a crime scene, and even lived near some of the attacks.
So it seemed like they might have finally found their man. Did they ever conclusively prove he was the Zodiac?
Well, despite years of investigation, the evidence against Allen never quite added up. His fingerprints and handwriting didn't match the Zodiac's, and DNA testing conducted after his death in 1992 failed to link him to the crimes.
So another dead end. But that doesn't mean the search has stopped, right?
Not at all. In recent years, new technologies like genetic genealogy have given investigators new tools to work with.
Genetic genealogy. Now that sounds pretty high-tech. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. It's actually a fascinating process. Genetic genealogy uses DNA analysis to trace family trees. By comparing DNA samples from crime scenes to databases of genetic information, investigators can potentially identify relatives of unknown suspects. It's been incredibly successful in solving cold cases, and there's a lot of hope that it could be the key to finally unmasking the Zodiac.
It's amazing to think that even now we're still trying to solve a mystery that began back in the 1960s. What do you think it says about this case that it continues to fascinate and frustrate us after all these years?
I think it speaks to the power of the unknown. The Zodiac Killer created a puzzle so complex and so disturbing that it continues to challenge our understanding. He left behind just enough clues to keep us guessing, but never enough to definitively solve the case, and that's what keeps people hooked. They want answers, they want closure, and they want to believe that even the most baffling mysteries can eventually be solved.
Yeah, well, I think it's safe to say that this deep dive has only scratched the surface of this incredibly complex and disturbing case.
It has. But hopefully we've given you a better understanding of the key elements of the Zodiac mystery, and maybe even inspired you to do some further exploring on your own.
So what does this all mean? The Zodiac Killer, despite his taunting letters, cryptic messages, and brutal crimes, remains an enigma. His true identity, his motives, and even the full extent of his crimes are still shrouded in mystery.
And perhaps that's the most unsettling aspect of it all. The Zodiac Killer may be silent, but his shadow still looms large. A reminder that some mysteries refuse to be solved, and that the darkness that motivated such acts can be difficult, if not impossible, to fully comprehend.
It really makes you wonder what drove him. Was it a lust for power, a twisted sense of pleasure, or something even darker lurking beneath the surface? That's something for you to ponder as you continue your own exploration of this enduring mystery. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Zodiac Killer, and remember, the truth is out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered.